Welcome to A Voice and Beyond, Leah Coutts. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks, Marissa. How are you?
I'm really good, and it's really fun seeing you over a screen instead of walking around the corridors of the conservatorium. We are work colleagues that we don't work in the same department, but our paths have crossed many a time. And it's really strange that with work colleagues, the stories that they have to share, if only you take that time to maybe get to know people around you. And we had a brief encounter in a lunchroom a few weeks ago where we started talking, and the next thing I was like, Leah, I have to get you on my podcast. You have so much to share that's of interest to our listeners. But I will give a little bit of an intro here. You are a senior lecturer at Queensland Conservatorium, Griffith University, based in the research department. Yeah. A health and fitness coach, a bodybuilding and prep coach, a posing coach, and a pro bodybuilder. Wow. See, I had
It's
no
quite
clue.
the
So many things. Yeah. So you have a really busy mind and a really busy and active body at the same time. But I want to know, where does all this begin? What came first here, and how did you embark on this journey of academia and then going into bodybuilding?
Do you know, it's interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is a memory I have of when I was 8 years old, and I was in the backyard of my best friend's house at the time, and we were making up aerobics routines to Michael Jackson. That's like my earliest fitness memory that I have when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Um, And around that same time, I also started learning keyboard. So I think that they've both been in my life, probably happened very similar times. But there's always been a tension for me between my pull towards music and my pull towards fitness. And I know that as we talk through a little bit of my story, some injuries and things will come out. It's almost like music has always been there for me. My heart and my soul and my depth of my being has been in fitness, but it hasn't always loved me back. So music's been there as like the rock, and
Yes.
fitness has been the one that's really stolen my heart.
Mm. So you've had kind of like a little bit of an inner conflict between the mind and the body going on.
That's so true. And the best thing about my research journey is I've found a way, or I found interests that really connect with both, which sounds really strange. But as you know as well, in the music research field, there's so much sports science, so much sports psychology, so much educational psychology, and just human behavior that's
Yes.
being explored in the music realm. And
Yes.
so I found my in to be able to explore everything that I'm interested in within music that connects back to fitness.
Well, I think we need to start with your backstory, which you've shared with me, as to what
Mhm.
started this journey of, because you firmly believe that we shouldn't be placing limitations on ourselves. And you've had a lot of limitations that you've had to confront and work your way
Mm.
through. So let's start with some of those, and going back to when you
Yeah.
were a child.
Sure. So when I was 13, I'd had some pains, aches in my bodies that led to some investigations and tests. And I was diagnosed with having scoliosis. So I had a curvature in my spine. It showed up on the x-rays. And the specialist at the time said my growth plates have fused, which is good news because I've stopped growing. If I hadn't stopped growing at 13, they would have put me in a back brace to try and correct this curvature of my spine. What we didn't know at the time is I didn't have scoliosis. So that was a misdiagnosis that kind of put a full stop to my journey for a little while, in that it's not going to get worse, but it's not going to get any better. So like there's nothing we can do. Go do some swimming to strengthen your shoulders. was the was the outcome of that, because I had a lot of neck and shoulder pain.
Mm-hmm.
But what it actually was, which we learned much, much later, was I have hypermobile joints. So I pop in and out very easily.
Oh, really?
And because of that, I can't hold my body in space as someone normally would, which means my joints were out of alignment, which pulled my spine into an S. So it wasn't structural, it was a mechanical flaw in my joints. So that was kind of where it started.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at the conservatorium, I did pipe organ. That was my first instrument in
I
first
didn't
year.
know that.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. Pipe organ.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the pipe organ at the conservatorium was my instrument.
Did not know.
Yeah. And one morning I was on the way to uni to practice, because I had to be at the conservatorium to practice on, I didn't have a pipe organ at home, funnily enough. And by the time I got to uni, I'd lost movement in my arm. And I thought I just slept funny on my neck. And I was like, okay, this is just, I've tweaked my neck, it'll right itself. And it actually took 6 months for me to gain movement in my arm. And I had all the tests you could. I was told, we can't find anything wrong with you. You may never move your arm again. So at this point, I was 17, 18. I'd been in the gym for a couple of years at this point. Like, I'd fallen in love with fitness at that point. And here was me as a 17, 18-year-old, not being able to play music and not being able to go to the gym, and being told this might be your life. So
what a terrible,
it was 6 months.
Yeah, what a terrible thing to be told at that age.
Yeah. It was 6 months until, like, I regained whatever loss of movement. There was no explanation. It was one of those things. And meanwhile, so I got back to the gym. I was doing kickboxing. I tore a ligament in my hip, took me back to the doctors, and they basically said, you're going to need 2 hip replacements by the time you're 40. And like, my body is just not designed for this stuff. I'm 40 next year and I have 2 healthy hips. So it was another thing of saying, you are not designed to do what you need to do. Couple of years later, I was a salsa dancer. I was performing, teaching, and every time I danced, I'd lose movement in my arm. So long story short, it was a recurring theme of losing movement in my arm. I had surgery to correct it. The surgery didn't work. And the surgeon said, the staples are in place. It's not surgical, see a physio. So I had 8 years of physios not being able to fix me. This tension between, I'm hurting if I move, I'm hurting if I don't move, no one can fix me. I'm just going to go keep smashing myself at the gym. I'm going to go rock climbing. I'm going to go dancing. I was in my 20s and admittedly doing pretty stupid things. But when no one can help you and you have this inner just passion, like, you know, my mental health plummeted, because everything I loved kept being taken away from me and no one could help me. And then when I was 29, a surgeon said to me, this is your shoulder and I can fix you. And I said, I've heard for 8 years it's not my shoulder. And it was, and I'd had the wrong surgery done when I was 21.
Oh my.
So that was 8 years of a whole lot. I have to admit, it's only been, and we can talk through how this happened, it's only been the last 2 years I found gratitude instead of resentment. But there was a whole lot of resentment for a long time of it felt like it was taken from me, even though people did their best, even though it was what science and surgical science knew at the time. But it took 2 more surgeries to fix my shoulder. And by that time, I'd learned so much wrong muscle patterning, like the chronic pain I had from when I was 13 to, I would say, 3-4 years ago. Like, that stays with you. That gets programmed into your body.
Yep.
And how, it's a long journey to work through that and to accept and work through it, you know. At any one point, I just think back and go, I must be so stubborn, but thank goodness I am.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, because a lot of other people would not have been as what's the word, like, trying to push against it and work against it. And And probably would have taken up knitting.
That's right. You know, and
Yeah.
it's just the thing that I look back on and say there's so many people who said to me, why do you need to be fit? And then it was actually, I went around my parents once and my brother went to give me a hug and my dad told me off because I didn't hug him back. And I said to my dad, I can't, it hurts. And my dad was like, oh, this is not about you wanting a six pack. This is actually bigger than, so everyone just thought, oh, Leah just wants to be in the gym. She's just being stupid, hurting herself. It took me to not be able to hug my brother for people to go, oh, this is actually impacting day-to-day living on every level.
Yeah. I think I asked you this question before when we had a chat, because it's like the Louise Hay book, that when you're suffering a certain injury, it's relating to some situation or some mindset that you're in at that moment of time. And I use the example of one of my students, that she had chronic tonsillitis. And one day I asked her, was there something that she wasn't saying? Or did she feel that someone wasn't listening to her voice? And it turned out that she did have a situation going on that was rather traumatic. Do you ever feel that some of that injury and some of that pain or some of those issues that you were suffering physically, was there something else going on in your life at that time? Have you ever thought about that may have caused that, or even some form of self-sabotage?
It's interesting because I think this comes down to your motivations as to why you want something. And this has shifted a lot for me through my journey. But growing up, as we all likely do, majority of us do, I had a very standard Western diet. You know, I had parents who, I'm fortunate, I shouldn't say as everyone, I have parents who love me, provided for me. So I had quite a safe childhood in a lot of ways. But food was like, mum loved with food. So she was a feeder. And then through my teenage years, my mum actually was really sick. And through my mum's illnesses, so she has bipolar and she had a lot of comorbidities that go with that, including being morbidly obese. And one day my mum said to me, this is hereditary and you've got a 4 in 10 chance of also getting bipolar. And at the time I was like, why tell me something that is so I felt so disempowered at the time. It's like, what am I meant to do with that? I felt like there's a loaded gun, right? Let's see, like Russian roulette. And then a few months later, she said, I got it wrong. You have a 7 in 10 chance of getting it. So this took me down the, hold on, what can I do? What can I do to gain control of my future? And I discovered the research around epigenetics and the idea of your genetics loads the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. You know, so maybe there's a genetic disposition, but it's up to me whether those genes are expressed or not. And what is the way to counter those genes? Health and fitness. So part of my reason for getting into health and fitness was it felt like I was potentially running away from the illnesses that my mum was experiencing. And of course, growing up or being in my 20s with a mum with bipolar has a whole lot of other family dynamics and challenges and traumas that we go through. And I think fitness was an escape, as well as a coping mechanism, as well as I don't want to be that. And, you know, I say that from a place of love. My mum knows this, you know, but it was a really challenging time of not wanting to have the illnesses that are in your family. So every time I injured myself, in my mind, I'm like, but I can't not do it because otherwise I will become ill in all these other ways. But I was running so far the other direction for a long time that wasn't healthy either. So yes, I had many injuries, misdiagnoses. I also likely caused a lot of physical harm myself because of how obsessed I became about it. I admit that. So in my 20s, I was probably unhealthily obsessed with using fitness as a tool to not deal with life, you know?
Mm. And when you had these injuries during your studies at the conservatorium, obviously you had to give up the pipe organ. Is that when you went
Yes.
into research?
Yeah, so I majored in music literature and pedagogy. So for those who are unfamiliar with that term, so the art and science of teaching.
Yep.
And I started teaching piano. So I was self-taught piano. I started teaching piano, even if I had to do it one-handed sometimes because I was in a sling or couldn't function. And the one thing I noticed was adults, especially, are very challenging to teach. And because they'll start something and they have in their mind that I'm either musical or I'm not, or I don't want to look like a fool, or I can't allow myself to express myself. Adults can be, if they're new to anything creative, very rigid, very operating from a place of I don't feel safe. So there's a lot of ego associated with it, which is hard to kind of crack through. So then they end up saying, oh, well, I'm not musical, and they stop lessons.
Right.
So I was up against this a lot. And then while I was researching my honors, I was crippled with perfectionism myself. So to the point of being grounded on the floor for hours with panic attacks and not functioning. And this was maybe associated with injuries, you know, maybe associated with that. But I think that most of us in our lives somewhere, in some shape or form, learn that there is criteria to our worthiness. You know, learn that in order to be worthy of love, affection, a place in the world, being seen, being heard, being respected, there's this certain criteria we need to meet. And
By
for me,
criteria, sorry, do you mean there has to be conditions? It can't be unconditional?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So for me, that was straight A student, your parents love you. You know, sevens at uni, your parents love you. So when it got to honors, which in Australia, you get first class, second class, third class, I was crippled by, I don't know what happens if I don't get first class honors.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
this anxiety spiral, but I'm a high achiever. I got sevens and I connected anxiety with high achievement. So when I was working with a psychologist who was trying to take away my anxiety, and I thought she was taking away my success because I'd connected those two things.
Oh,
So that was a whole nother thing
that is
to
so
unpack
messed
of.
up, isn't it?
It's messed up. But honestly, it is within us. I think there's so many different versions of that same story. And I think if
Yes.
all of us speak it out loud, we can see how messed up that is.
Yes.
So, you know, teaching adults a skill that they want to, but they're so scared of failing or not expressing themselves, or maybe they're scared to express themselves, that's where the self-sabotage cycle kind of kicks in.
Yes.
And so my research was about how do we transform mindsets so we can behave in a way that supports us. Really, my goal was really to keep adults at the piano. And what I realized was the way we communicate, the way that we first and foremost appreciate we have a human being in front of us. It's not a pair of hands at the instrument. It's not, you know, just like if you're at the gym, it's not a body with muscles. It's actually, there's a human being with values, belief systems, maybe traumatic things, maybe cycles of self-sabotage. If we don't take that whole thing into consideration, then people are just going to walk away from their dreams. And that just breaks my heart.
Yes, yes. No, that relates also to in the singing voice community. And I know that a lot of singers, I call us, we're a very special breed because we spend so much time in our own heads. We're constantly criticizing ourselves. We're listening out for all those imperfections. We don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we do correctly. So I totally get, I have students that, I can see them when they're singing, all they're doing is just listening to themselves. They're not telling the story of what they're, or conveying an emotion, because they're so caught up in their own minds. And there's a lot of talk now within our community about creating safe spaces for our students where they can come in and they can be curious and they can explore and they can be vulnerable without feeling all those things. So it is very relevant what you're talking about. And when I looked through, you have so many peer-reviewed journal articles that have been published. I don't know, it looked like there are about 30 of them. And I don't know, it could be more. I'm not really sure, but there are a lot.
Not quite.
But I kept seeing the words empowering, not having limitations. So how do you achieve that?
Yeah, do you know, the one thing that I think empowering is a word that is often overused, and I'm starting to move away from that word. I just haven't found a good replacement, because I can't do anything to empower someone else. I'm not doing something to them. I'm creating a space where they step into it themselves. So I don't like the word teach either, because it means that I do something and it automatically happens for you. So, you know, but language has its limitations, of course. Pun intended. So, but for me, it's about, what is your why? So, you know, I mentioned in my 20s, I was running away from becoming ill, my self-worth got attached to, yes, my uni grades, but my six-pack. You know, my self-identity was, I have to show that I am this healthy person because I am not going to be sick, you know, and it was not a healthy way of looking at it. But my reasoning was because I didn't want to be something, or because I felt I had to be a certain way for other people to love me. I had something to prove in a way. And then in my 30s, as I recovered from all of my injuries and I worked with exercise physiologists and my current sports chiro, and I understood pain in relation to the body, and I'd done my PhD on mindsets, and I understood psychology, and I started down my spiritual path of, like, I really got into Eastern philosophies and Buddhism, and I think all of these things combined to go, what is my why? Like, I know I'm compelled. I know there's this like pull from inside of me that I have to pursue my bodybuilding dreams. Yes, one reason is I was told, you'll never do a pull-up again. You'll never squat again. Give up your bodybuilding dream. You're never going to be able to compete. So I feel like part of the motivation was, how dare you place limitations on what I'm capable of? And then that's not enough though, because that's still an external thing. That's still, I need to prove something because of something else someone thinks of me. So that's not enough. And part of me was like, if you're already worthy, what would you do? If you are already worthy, it's kind of like one of those things, if money's no object, what would you do with your life? But really, if you were already fully worthy, a full embodiment of who you are, what would you want to do? I would be in the gym, I would be on the bodybuilding stage, I would be expressing myself through my fitness journey, and I would be helping others to find their full expression of themselves, whatever that looks like for them. And that's exactly what I'm already doing with my life, which is amazing.
Yes. So to me, it sounds like when you're empowering others, empowerment seems to be connected to authenticity and someone being their most authentic self.
Yeah. Because if you don't believe that, if you don't fully believe, like subconsciously or consciously, if you don't believe you're worthy of what you want, you're going to self-sabotage, whether you realize it or not. You know, you'll get close to your goal, or you'll even achieve it, and then you'll move away from it again. And we see that in health and fitness all the time, yo-yo dieting, you know, and all those things. It's like, what is your why? What's your North Star? You know, that's kind of that guiding light of who you really want to become in this life.
Sounds like you're very defiant as well. And
Yeah.
and I say that because if someone tells me I can't do something, I have to prove them wrong. And
Yeah.
most of my life, I grew up being told, oh, you'll never amount to anything. You're not very smart. So I have a PhD in a book now, academic textbook that actually sits in university libraries. And, or, like I've been told so many different things, and I've always had to go, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. And here's the proof, and shove that where the sun don't shine.
You know what's interesting though? Maybe it's also because the one thing my parents have always said to me is you can do whatever you want. Like, so I had that story really imprinted on me from as long as I can remember, is you can do whatever you put your mind to. So maybe when other people say you can't, I'm like, well, hold on. That goes against this like core belief that I was given as a kid.
Yes. Well, that's really, but in my case, I wasn't told that. So there must be some kind of inner instinct or survival mechanism that triggers within me. Who knows? Maybe we need to do a past life regression here to find out what's going on. Maybe I was a female warrior or a male warrior, who knows? But anyway,
You know
we're
what it
getting,
is though?
yes.
Yeah, if we get rid of what Western society imposes on us, we all have who we authentically are. And if we allow the baggage of society's voice to be silenced, we hear loudly who we are and what we can do. And you have that in you so clearly and so strongly, as
Yes.
do I. And I don't know that that yet is what others always have. And that's one thing that I'm really passionate about, like helping others to go, well, what is the noise and what happens when that noise goes away? What's left? And how do we care for that? And that can be a really unsafe place, because if you've never allowed yourself to be that authentic, vulnerable being,
Yes.
that can be a really scary place to be, right?
Yes. And there are so many words that come to mind that stop us. And you've used a couple of them. One was perfectionism, that idea of having to be perfect. And I learned from a coach, Brendan Burchard, who is a high performance coach who works with a lot of CEO, Fortune 500 company directors and Olympic athletes, Oprah Winfrey. And he said something that really changed my point of view on this. And when it comes to perfecting something, you actually have to be doing it. You can't perfect something that you're not doing. And I went, well, that puts a whole different spin on this whole perfectionism idea, and trying to be perfect, because if you're not actually doing the thing that you're wanting to perfect, well, then you're not, it's never going to be perfect. So, I mean, go on. Sorry.
So perfectionism really, as an, if I can call it an affliction, like I think that I'm a recovering perfectionist. I think it's always a practice now that is part of me to move beyond it. But really the affliction of perfectionism is where you can't take action because you have this unrealistic expectation of what it needs to be before you present it to the world, right? So that's interesting. In order to get better at something, yes, you need to take action, and perfectionism stops you being able to even do that because you're so worried your self-worth is attached to the end product. And that's the problem. You're saying my worth is attached to my achievements. Like I had to do so much work to go, I am not my PhD. I am not my publications. I am not my six-pack. I am not the title, like what I've achieved in the athletic world. I am not those things. I've achieved those things. I've done those things, but my self-worth is okay, even if all that gets taken away. That's
Yes. Yes. I see. That's it. Yeah, this is really cool because I consider myself to be a high achiever because I set high standards for everything that I do. I'm not a, well, I can be a perfectionist, but it doesn't stop me from taking those steps forward to actually achieving the end goal that I'm needing to achieve. I always figure it out. And I back myself by saying, no, I can do it because I'm a hard worker. So the stories I'm telling myself are, I am a hard worker, so therefore I will always achieve what I need to achieve. And it's, I will get there. I will always get there, are the stories that I tell myself.
I love that. I mean, really, the only thing that stops you from progressing is if you stop. You know, like if you give up, there is no chance of you progressing. Like that's the only way to not keep moving forward.
Yeah.
I love that look you have.
Yeah, I kind of get addicted to the feeling of achievement as well. And I know, like you've stepped into bodybuilding. Is there an addiction there where, is it that, okay, maybe, you know, this perfectionism comes into it a little bit, not in terms of that it stops you, but are you aiming to have that perfect look? And when you hit your goals, is there a little bit of an adrenaline rush, or a feeling that you get addicted to every time you hit that next step that you're moving towards?
So I'm definitely not perfectionist anymore, especially when it comes to fitness. But I will say there's an interesting tension around competitiveness and being focused on the process, you know. So any sport, just like learning any new skill, music included, it's always the focus on the process that you want. Fall in love with the process,
I love
not the
processes.
outcome or the end result.
I love
and
a good process.
Bodybuilding is a very slow sport, you know. So I competed at the start of this year. The next time I'm on stage is October next year. It's a very slow sport. So if you're only chasing those adrenaline pumped moments, you're going to hate the journey, right?
Yes.
But saying that, so yeah, I've always said I'm not competitive. I just have to be the best. So I kind of accepted that means I'm competitive.
That's a contradiction in itself.
What I meant was, I don't want to squash other people to achieve, but if there's something for the taking, you better watch out because it's mine.
Okay.
And one of my mottos that got me through my prep was, what would a pro bodybuilder do right now? Go and do that. That was my, you know, when you're extremely depleted, when you get to such low body fat percentages that are not healthy. So I'm talking about the sport of competitive bodybuilding that is not healthy and sustainable.
What is that lowest body fat you've gotten down to? Because I know basically what a woman needs to be at. So what's the lowest you've ever been?
The healthy ranges are 20% plus. Athletic usually sits in the realm of like the 17 to 20. Bodybuilders are below 15. And by some measurements, I was under 10%. I don't think I actually was. By DEXA scans, I think I was about 13%. So, you know, there's always a degree of error. But the main thing is when you don't have the necessary body fat on your body, yes, aesthetically, it's amazing. But you don't have the fat to support your hormones. You can't sleep. You can't think straight. You walk into a room and you go, why am I here now? Someone says, can you go into the kitchen and get me something? It's like, I can't get off the chair right now. So there's a lot in the sport. And I must say, I geek out on self-imposed suffering. I love putting my back against the wall and seeing what I'm made of.
But so you've spent your life doing that. You've been conditioned. You've had a life's
Yeah,
worth of conditioning for that, Leah.
yeah. And I absolutely, yeah, I love it. So I think being on stage is amazing. Love performing. You know, it sounds terrible, but put me in a little bikini and heels and get me posing on stage and I'm completely in my element. But that is such a small part of the sport. I had such an amazing season and successes. So I still have this thing in my mind of I can achieve anything I put my mind to, because I did.
Yes.
You know, my first season, I became 4-time pro. I won a national pro show and an international pro show. So I kind of, my first season, I've achieved so much, which
That
I'm
is
very, very grateful
amazing.
for.
Yeah,
You
congratulations.
know?
That's so cool. So does that mean when you're pro that you're being paid or you're being sponsored or you win
It
money?
You can compete for money in the future, especially on the international stage, which I'll be doing next year. It helps with gaining sponsorship. Sponsorship is so much more now, like it's about your following and your reach and all those things. So I'm working on those things. But yeah, the I guess it's not a sport that makes much money, but it gives you the experience to then, like, as a comp prep coach,
Yeah.
as a pro athlete, it kind of gives you that authority in the field, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I
So,
would say, back to your question, sorry,
yes.
about
Yes.
peak moments, every single period, there's new challenges. Like, there's challenges around being that lean. There's also challenges going the other way. Like, I am the heaviest I've ever been now, which is amazing because it means I'm putting on more muscle, which I need for my sport. But you have to be uncomfortable with being a healthy body. It sounds silly, be uncomfortable with being
No.
healthy.
But
That
but
sounds ridiculous.
but the challenge I see in that is you're dealing with a changing body all the time. So you're
Yeah.
having these fluctuations and they're not instant, obviously they're gradual, but you have to feel very confident within your own skin to be able to look in the mirror and see, like, this is the heaviest I've ever been and this is what I look like today, and in a few months time you're as lean as down to that 13% body fat index. It's like you have to be, I don't know, you have to have a really good frame of mind around body image, I feel.
Yeah, you really do. And the more I talk to people and listen to other podcasts in the field of bodybuilding, if you are not in a place where you have that inherent worthiness and safety within yourself, this sport is not psychologically safe.
Yes.
If I
Yes.
competed when I wanted to in my 20s, it would have been the worst thing for me. But right now, I can look at myself 11 kilos heavier than I was on stage and go, I look healthy, I look fit, I look athletic,
You do.
and I'm enjoying this process. This is part of the sport too. It's not just the stage lean photos. This is the sport, and I have to learn to love that as well.
So in your 20s, did you have a body image problem?
Yeah, if I didn't have a six pack, I thought I wasn't worthy of anything. But it's interesting because then I think I shared with you, I'd be in a relationship and people would, or the guy would say, I'm not feminine because I'm not soft enough, just because I had a six pack. And then I was in a relationship with an ex bodybuilder and I'd be injured and I wouldn't have definition and I wasn't sexy because I wasn't hard enough.
Oh
And so
gosh.
I just ended
Yes.
up confused. Like, how am I allowed to look in order to be loved was what I couldn't figure out, because I couldn't be who I wanted to be as an athlete. But even when I could, I had people saying I shouldn't look like that. And even now, I've been told straight to my face, I could never date someone who looks like you. Like, I don't think I look so weird.
You don't look weird, not at all. But the thing is, I think people have always associated that look with men. Probably, the sport has pretty much, I know there's women in the sport, obviously, but it's a male-dominated sport. And
I think historically, and it's also historically and also nowadays, a lot of the sport is enhanced, meaning there's performance enhancing drugs, there's steroids, there's all those things that enhance your ability to put on muscle. I'm a natural athlete, so that's definitely not me. And when you look at the women in the enhanced side of things, yes, they're unnaturally large because they're not naturally large, they're enhanced. They're taking supplement, things to look like that. But nowadays, interestingly, the women's categories are exploding far more than the men's. And it's really exciting to see.
So we've talked about the mental state of mind and body image, but what about the physical side? I mean, obviously you've got to do some heavy lifting. Does it ever get too much, or where you think, I cannot possibly do another rep? And when that happens, how do you push through that pain barrier or that threshold to get to the other side?
There's two different components. One is understanding when it's your body that's saying, I'm not recovering, and when it's your mind that's saying, I don't want to. And when I kept breaking in my 20s, it was always my mind would never give up. So I would push until my body broke. So I finally learned that line. But now it's like recovery is so important. If your performance in the gym starts to go down, you talk to your coach and they're like, okay, it's time for a deload. It's time for a recovery week. It's time to lessen, recover, so we can go again. So there's cycles in the sport that are really important. Otherwise you just burn out. You increase your risk of injury and it's not sustainable. So the cycles you go through make it a sustainable sport when done right, and which is why a coach is so important.
Yes.
And the mental side, you remind yourself of your why, you put on some motivation music, you think about the competitors who are out repping you and you're like, you know what, I want it more than them.
Yeah. We talked about you being competitive before. And look, we just were talking about it being a male orientated industry. What about the male the other competitors and your coaches? Like, how has your treatment in the industry or in that competition arena been kind to you?
In a lot of ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So I think in any competitive sport, there's always going to be some levels of toxicity to be mindful of. Just to start on a positive note, the other competitors are amazing. Like, we know what you go through to get on stage, and we all have a personal journey of overcoming something, whether it's hospitalization, injuries, mum with 3 kids, there's always a really amazing transformation. So between the competitors, we all really support each other, cheer each other on. Like, it's an amazing experience. There's a lot of stories around coaches that aren't great. And I had a coach say to me once, you're not ready for the stage, literally 2 seconds before I went on stage for the first time ever. He basically said, you're not ready, you shouldn't be here.
Why would
and then he said, you're
What's
against
the point of that?
I don't know, except his own, I don't know, toxic masculinity issues. I don't know, but I won that show, and so I qualified for nationals, and it was interstate, and he didn't travel with me. I went down with my mum, and I sent him a check-in video the night before my competition, and his only reply was, let's hope you look better tomorrow. Like I have a PhD in how to treat humans when it comes to coaching, and this is not it. Like, you don't even need a PhD in it to know that is not good treatment. But if I was imagine if I was a 20-year-old hearing this from a male in his 40s, who that power dynamic relationship, and lucky for me, a colleague and fellow coach stepped in, and he's now not only my coach, he's now my business partner. So, there's beautiful people. I think you just have to, it's worth changing coaches until you find that relationship. You know what it's like with singing. You know what it's like when you have that connection and trust. You were talking about safety before.
Exactly. And
But
it's
and
also,
I hear more.
like even having life coaches and business coaches, there are people that you resonate with and people that you don't resonate with. And funnily enough, I had an amazing life coach, and she was a Brenda Bouchard life coach, and she was a bodybuilder, ex-bodybuilder, ex-police officer. And she was perfect for me because she was a butt kicker. And that's obviously the kind of person that I need in my life. Someone who's really disciplined and has, this must be done. And yes, I'm really responsive to that. But through this journey that you've been on, talking about limitations, and we've talked about some of those limitations that you've been through, and physically as a bodybuilder, that like the pains that you've suffered, you've endured growing up. And now that you're at this stage of life and you look back, were there people that tried to stop you other than your coach? Were there other people that tried to silence you or stop you from embarking on the journey that you wanted to go on in life?
So through my 20s, that was obviously medical professionals who couldn't fix me. And I think a lot of medical professionals just want to keep you safe and wrap you up in cotton wool and go, if you just sit on the couch, you're not going to break. You're not going to live, but you're not going to break. So apart from that, I think I've been really fortunate to have, like I said, really supportive parents, really supportive friends. I think those who have witnessed my journey have actually gone, this is so obvious that Leah would do something crazy like this.
Yes. Yes.
Always, like I said, it's always been that tension between fitness and music. And I think a few people have gone, Leah bounces around a lot. Like she was a salsa dancer, then she was teaching piano, and she's teaching Zumba, and now she's doing personal training. Oh, she's gone back to piano. She's doing a PhD. But like, to me, they all combine. And I think now the people in my life, it just kind of makes sense that everything I've done has prepared me to be exactly where I am. So I think I'm fortunate in that way.
Yeah. Do you have people say to you, wow, you're so busy, but for you, it's just like, no, this is just my life?
Do you know, I think every week my mum says, I'm worried that you're burning out. And I say to her, if I had space in my life, I would just fill it with something. That's just what I do. Like I'm in a place where I don't have children. I can be a little bit selfish with how I use my time. And I feel like if that's allowing me to do coaching as well, that's not selfish. Like, yes, the bodybuilding sport, fine, it's a very self-indulgent sport, but who you become through that means you can be of service to others. So I'm also questioning and pushing back when I get told it's such a selfish sport. I've changed because of it, and I'm a better human to others because of it. So, is that really selfish? I don't
know. No, except when it comes to meal times. I dated a bodybuilder once, and all I remember was that we were sitting down eating 20 times a day. And it was always a protein. Oh, I've got to have my protein. And what have you learned about yourself through this process of bodybuilding?
I think it's been a playground for me building myself up as who I am. So I mentioned before a little bit of like, I hinted at like the spirituality side, the Buddhist side, and there's real tensions, right? There's this, I have goals, which is future oriented, but the idea of being present and being in the moment, and it feels like it's a paradox. How can you be competitive while being present? And I've learned how well they go together through this journey, and how it's when you let go and you accept what is that you actually make decisions that's going to serve your future self. That may not sound too tangible in
No,
bodybuilding, but that's what I've grown through.
I 100% get it. 100%.
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. So, what was the inspiration then for Soulful Vegan Fitness, your business? Tell us about that business.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I'm vegan, and being in the sport of bodybuilding, being vegan is quite interesting because people think it can't be done. Like, how can you be fit and healthy when you don't eat animal products? And I think it's becoming more normalized that,
Yes.
you know, plant-based living is actually healthy. But I think, so to me, fitness is about three different things. There's understanding nutrition. How do you fuel your body? How are you actually giving your body what it needs in order to function optimally? Then there's the fitness side, which is, you know, how do we move our bodies? Are we maintaining our strength? Are we supporting good bone health? Are we sleeping well and recovering well and doing all those things? But then the soulful part is the, what is your why and who are you actually underneath all that baggage? How is what you're fueling your body with and how you're moving your body, how is that helping you to become the more authentic you that's just waiting to come out? So being vegan as well, that obviously is the clientele that I work with most. I understand that lifestyle, the ethics align. That's where I'm most comfortable. But I feel a lot of the fitness industry is you need to look a certain way because you're not good enough how you are.
Yes.
That's the rhetoric with fitness. You are not worthy unless you look like XYZ. And it's so wrong. And I'm saying that as a bodybuilder. Like, it's not about what you, the sport of bodybuilding isn't even about what you look like. You know, it's who you become through that journey. And so I struggle even on my website. Like, if I think about writing looking better, I'm like, but who's to say how they want to look? I don't want to say, but looking better is what sells. You know, do you want to lose body fat? Come work with me. I'm more, how do you want to feel? Let's do that.
Yes, that's a really good way of putting it, because yeah, then if you're putting down that you're helping people achieve a certain body image, then you're going to attract a certain clientele as well that probably won't stick
and
with
you're perpetuating things. Yeah, and it's perpetuating things that just hurt my heart. Whereas the physical transformation comes, it's a byproduct of your activities.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And what continues with like motivating you on the activities is, what are the values that you're expressing? You know, people say to me, is it hard being vegan? I'm like, no, because I don't see animals as food. It's like literally that simple. I have such a core value that if they're a living being, they don't belong in my stomach. It's not even a question of motivation. It's just not, it's a non-issue. So and that's the same with fitness.
So is that why you became vegan?
Yeah.
How long have you been
vegan? I went vegan the month after I submitted my PhD because I needed something to like put into my brain, and I'd stopped researching. And I read a book by Peter Singer called The Most Good You Can Do. And it was actually on effective altruism. It wasn't even on animal rights only. It was just on how do you effectively do the most good in the world. And there was a chapter on animal ethics, and it was like instant switch for me from then. But what started it, so I grew up in England, right? And when I was 8, I went on oh, you didn't? When I was 8, I went on a school excursion to a sheep farm, and I loved animals. And I wanted to be a vet, as you do when you're a kid and you love animals. I want to be a vet. Not good with blood, but I wanted to be a vet. And they said, who here wants to go to the slaughterhouse? Now, I was 8. There was no parental consent. My mum I asked mum, she didn't even remember this happened, but no one had ever asked her. And it was kind of a biology lesson, like, let's see the organs. And anyway, traumatized me as a kid. So I think it took me until I was 13 when I was allowed to become vegetarian. Did it really badly because nobody knew how to be vegetarian well
Yes.
back then. And I became really unhealthy. So I went back to eating meat. I was bullied for being vegetarian, didn't know how to eat. I was living off cereal, was not looking
Yes.
after myself. And
Yes.
so went back to eating meat. And so when I read this book of Peter Singer's, it was like a smack in the face. Like, you were right when you were a teenager and you were bullied out of your values.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so much guilt and so much shame and so much anger because what I knew to be true, I had kind of socialized out of me. So yeah, I became vegan overnight, and that was it. That was 6 years ago.
Okay.
Six and a
So
half years ago.
with your business, you describe this as more than just an online fitness program. It's a holistic wellness program that supports women to create a sustainable, healthy lifestyle that enables them to achieve their fitness goals while developing their inner confidence and vitality. So, who is your typical client, and what kinds of things do you do when you're working with your clients?
Yeah, good question. So the majority tend to be those who have likely tried a lot of different things in the past, have a history of yo-yoing and not quite being able to get something to stick. And let's face it, that's the majority of women nowadays.
Yes.
There's people who are newly vegan or really wanting to try plant-based, but they don't know how to because there's so much misinformation in the fitness, in the food industry, period. There's so much misinformation. So a lot of people who are confused come to me as well, but really they're people who know that they want to feel better. Like, so many of my clients say, I'm starting to feel like me again. And I think that is the biggest compliment I can hear, that they're feeling like themselves,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's about having like personalized nutrition, personalized fitness, but personalized, who are you? Like, how does this fit into your lifestyle? What do you need to work through? Like, what habits do you have? Do you know why you have those habits? And like, peeling back the layers, it's that life coaching element that really, I guess, is the most fascinating part, but it's the part that unlocks sustainability, So we have deep dive conversations.
Yes. And have you had a particular client that you think, wow, this person's had the greatest transformation? Is there someone who comes to mind?
Oh, do you know, I have to say, I'm actually training my sister-in-law at the moment. She'll probably get a kick out of being mentioned, actually.
Yeah. Hi,
And
sister-in-law.
Hi, Sheree. So she's someone who has been in my life since we were 16. And through my fitness journey, it's always been like, she doesn't want to look like me. That's fine. And then it became, okay, I'm thinking about getting into some fitness because I'm like sick of not feeling good in my body. And now she's this gym rat. She's lost, like, she's always at the gym. She loves it. Her kids are getting into fitness. She's lost over 13 kilos. But it's not
Amazing.
even that. It's that she's happier. Like, she can show me that she's lost 3 clothes sizes, which is amazing, and she's looking so much better. But it's actually,
Not
she's
about that.
feeling like she's a nicer person to be around. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And I mentioned that, yeah, because obviously she's in my life. I see the transformation like on a really minute detail, but I'm so proud of who she is, who she's allowed herself to reveal who she is, because she's putting herself first.
Hold on. I just lost you then.
Ah,
It just went,
am I back?
okay. Yeah, you are. That's okay. That's okay. All good. All good. So, what are the most common lifestyle and mindset challenges that a typical client comes to you with?
The biggest one is all or nothing thinking. Like, I have to do everything or there's no point in doing anything. Like, I accidentally ate a cookie that wasn't in my plan, therefore I'm going to McDonald's for dinner. You know, like, it's that self-sabotaging behavior of, I messed up once, the whole day's a write-off. Oh no, now the whole week's a write-off. Or treating food as punishment. Like, I overate one day, therefore I have to undereat the next day. Really toxic, like really difficult pattern to get out of as well. The whole food is not the enemy, you know, and being on plan, off plan, all it is understanding our life, you know, and what that can teach us and how do we learn from that. It's just like making a mistake when we're practicing music. Like, what do we learn from that? What do we do differently next time? How do we improve?
Yes.
So they're the two main things.
That's interesting. This morning, when I was listening to a morning program, they were talking about the guy that wrote the 5-2 diet. Is that what it's called? The 5-2 diet? Yeah. He's now, and he's written a whole bunch of books on dieting. And he now has a book that kind of goes against all the other books, and it's about doing one thing a day, just making one change a day.
I'm glad to hear that, because his other books, yeah, not a fan.
Okay.
I just think when you have such rigid rules, and it applies to that all or nothing thinking, and when it's not sustainable, you're just encouraging a yo-yo lifestyle. It's like Tony Ferguson and like shakes and all the rest of it. Their business model is they need it to be unsustainable because you need to be a repeat customer, you
Oh
know?
my God.
And you see people have amazing transformations. They don't learn how to have sustainable eating habits, and they achieve their goal and they just go straight back to their old patterns because that's all they know, and they gain it all back and then some.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So I think one thing I'm really passionate about giving the tools, about educating. It's not, here's the plan and you have to follow the plan because that's the only thing you know. I'm actually teaching the tools so they're learning to, it becomes a lifestyle.
And you know, in today's day and age, what are some of the limiting beliefs that you find women have about themselves, or about themselves in relationships or in the workplace? So not about their body so much, but just about themselves and what their capabilities are.
It's interesting. While I think, the thing that comes to mind is, and I'm sure you know this, men will put themselves up for promotion even if they're grossly underqualified, and a woman who is overqualified will decide that she's not in the race and not even bother applying.
Yes.
Have you heard that before?
Well, we work in higher education.
Yeah.
We know, I mean, the women that are around us, I'm sure they've had to work so hard to be in the positions they're in.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think we are so used to just keeping ourselves small, you know? And I don't know, to me, I think we're very fortunate where we work. We have amazing women in leadership, and we have really good examples. And
yes,
in my experience, we've had a lot of support. So, but yeah, usually I think that we just decide we're not good enough.
Yes.
Which is really sad.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And we've been held back generations and generations. And I think that just gets passed on, and it becomes part of the narrative that's really difficult to rewrite. I think it's happening, but we're not, I mean, there's still, it really scares me when we talk about inequality in music, for example, in some of the lectures I give, and there's always some students who go, hasn't this been fixed already? No. Like, they just, because we talk about it, people think it's been fixed, and that's really not the case.
No, there's still gender bias out there. I've spoken to a lot of performers that women are not being paid equally to men. It happens, yes, it's definitely, it's still happening in music. It's still women still have to prove themselves. They still have to look a certain way on stage. They still have to be younger than the men. Like women seem to have an expiry date more so than men do, also when you think about it. So there's still a lot of bias around gender. And what's the greatest thing that you believe that we can do for ourselves on a daily basis?
Do you know the number one habit I think that is the game changer is before you go to bed, set an intention for the next day. Because in the moment, we're driven by emotion. Do I feel like going to the gym? No. Okay, I won't go. Do I feel like eating that salad or, you know, that curry that I made? Or do I feel like this? So we're very much going to be ruled by our emotions. But what I found is when you set an intention, you've decided a future action and it literally takes emotion out of it. So at this time of day, I'm going to do this. That time of day rolls around and you just find yourself, I mean, it's a practice, but you just find yourself doing it. There's no resistance because you decided the day before. So that's my biggest thing.
Yeah, I do that on the weekend prior to the week ahead. Isn't that weird? I fill out a whole scheduling every day by the half hour, everything that I'm doing for the following week. And I schedule in when I'm going to the gym, and I schedule in when I'm going to do Pilates, and I actually physically go and book those classes. So, so
Yeah.
I set my intentions on the weekend, and then I look at them the night before, and then I look in the morning of. So I know exactly how my day is going to roll, and there's no arguing. I don't argue with my diary. Sometimes I will eliminate things though, because I can tend to overcommit. And I feel that I've done that this week, but I've still gone ahead and done everything. I didn't end up getting rid of anything. So what
Thanks
about,
for not erasing me.
oh, I wouldn't dare. Oh my gosh, I've been looking forward to this. And what about practices such as meditation, filling out a gratitude journal, or journaling in
I
general,
was going to
things like
say,
that?
what one of the biggest, it's becoming a cliche, but it's a great cliche for a reason, is the power of gratitude. You know, it's not possible to feel grateful and angry or grateful and resentful at the same time. And I think that it helps us to become present. You know, like we live in our heads, we can live in our heads so much, whether
Oh,
it's
we do.
future or
Yes.
past.
Yeah.
As soon as we're grateful, we land, you know. I think meditation is a good one. Meditation is misconstrued so much. Like so many people think it's still just empty your mind. It's not what meditation's about, right? It's about not buying into the thoughts. It's about witnessing the thoughts, but just not entertaining them. Like, oh, they go, you know?
Yeah.
And I think so many people said to me, I can't meditate because I can't turn my mind off. And it just makes me really sad because that's not the point of meditation. Yeah, it's about not buying into the stories that we're hearing. Meditation for me is often just stopping and taking a few intentional breaths through the day. Like I don't sit and have like a practice. It's actually built in to just moments in the day for me. I have clients where it helps with winding down for bed, or it helps with getting ready for the day. And it can work differently for so many different people depending on lifestyle and what you need, right?
Yeah. I have alarm triggers that go off during the day. And I have my 3 intentions, or I have 3 words that mean something to me, that when my alarm goes off, I repeat them to myself. So it's a
I love
reminder.
that.
Yeah, it's a reminder. For me, this is how I want to show up during the day. And am I actually showing up that way? Yeah, it drives my family insane. And every time, and they all take the mickey out of me. They all go, oh.
Do they have their own words now?
No, no one does. They don't do what I do. I'm probably the most what people call woo-woo in my family. And by the way, I learned woo-woo when I first started this podcast. The very first guest that I interviewed used the word woo-woo, and that was March last year, and I've heard it so many times since. I'd never heard it before. But okay, in wrapping up, what is
Mm-hmm.
your mission here, Leah?
Mm,
What do you think your greater
mm,
purpose is?
mm. Definitely the first thing that comes to mind is to help people connect with themselves.
Mm.
And the way that I do that is through their health and fitness journey. Because I think it's a sign of self-respect. Like, how do I look after my body? It's the number one gratitude for being alive, if you ask me, is respecting how we move and fuel our body.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a Thich Nhat Hanh quote that says, oh, I'm gonna mess it up now. Let me find it quickly. Sorry, we can edit this bit
That's
out.
all right. No, it's all good. I heard a really cool thing by Brené Brown today, and I can't remember that either. But isn't it funny when you hear something that really resonates with you? I actually put it
Yeah.
into my phone. I thought, wow, it answered a question that I had about myself, in that I'm a very social person, but yet I'm alone a lot, and it's okay.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yes.
she's like that. She
Yes.
said she's often alone and lonely, but she always has a lot of people around her. And the way she put it into
Mm.
context, I thought, wow, that really resonates with me, because I actually prefer my own company a lot of the time. Mm.
Yeah.
And
I'm the same. I found the
yeah,
quote.
yeah. Okay, so what's the
The
quote?
quote, keeping your body healthy is an expression of gratitude to the whole cosmos, the trees, the clouds, everything. So that's Thich Nhat Hanh. And I also think that keeping your body healthy is the biggest sign of respect for you having life, that you can,
Yes,
by enacting that. And
yes.
I think if we're disconnected to ourselves, if we're not connected to who we are, we're really missing out on living life to the fullest. But I think that's just all that social conditioning. So part of my mission, I guess, is to help people reconnect to their authentic selves through their fitness journey.
And don't you think, though, it all comes back to how you then connect with others? If you're not kind to
Mm.
yourself, how can you be kind to others? If you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of others? If you're not
Yeah.
respecting yourself, how do you then respect others?
Yeah.
That,
So much so.
yeah,
That's so much so. And so many people are like, oh, I can't prioritize myself because I've got others. Whereas it's like, well, you've got to fill your own cup first,
100%, 100%. So what advice, in wrapping this up, what advice would you like to share with others if you had to give one piece of advice to our listeners?
Take the time to think about who you are underneath it all, underneath all the noise, underneath all of the limiting beliefs. If you could get rid of all of those limitations, who would you be? And be that person.
Mm-hmm. And by that, we don't mean occupation or what you do in life.
No,
Because that's,
no, not at all.
that's really interesting. You ask someone, well, what do you do, or who are you? And people say, well, I'm a teacher, I'm an author, I'm a podcast host. No, but who are you really?
Yeah. You know, the question I love asking people, especially like if you first meet them, instead of saying, what do you do? What has brought you joy lately?
Oh, most
Mm.
people would be so confronted with that question, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a disrupting question.
People would
They're
not,
expecting you to say, what do you do?
yeah.
Yeah, what's brought you joy?
Well, I tell you what, I should have asked that question to the lady that was coughing all over me on the train this afternoon. And if there's one way to get rid of someone that you don't know is just ask them, so what has brought you the greatest amount of joy lately? Most people would be, there'd be a lot of people that would feel confronted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really gets to a bit more of the who are you? Like that
Exactly.
authentic.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
And I made the comment that I made because I totally get, and I think that's a beautiful, beautiful question. But I just know sometimes when I'm having conversations with people, with so many people, you can only go so deeply.
Yeah.
I've been told
Yeah.
by my family that I'm intense because I think so deeply about things.
Mm.
And I'm not talking about my children. It's like my brother and some of his family. They say, "Oh, you're so intense. Like some of your conversations are really deep." And I'm thinking, well, I'm not very good at small talk anymore. I'm sorry.
No,
I can be whoever you want
no.
me to be. I can talk about anything you want me to talk about, but I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Leah, we're going to share all your links with the listeners. They're going to be in the show notes for this episode. And so what are you going to be up to next? Where do you see yourself heading next?
So the bodybuilding plan is Natural Olympia in Vegas. That's one of the largest natural stages competitions in the world. So that's exciting. And I'm at the stage of I'm really opening up my coaching services at this point to those who feel called to it. Of course,
Yes.
like I was saying, you need to work with coaches who resonate with you.
Yes.
And if that's me, fabulous. If it's not me, that's also fabulous. But yeah, I'm really at the stage of just exploring who is that person, and come find me, because I'd love to, work with them.
Yes. Oh, that sounds amazing. And I'm so happy for you. And I'm really excited about all the work that you're doing. I feel like we're kindred spirits there with so many things that you were talking about. And I think we need to meet in the lunchroom more often.
Yes, I was going to say, so much gratitude to you for allowing me this platform to share some
Oh,
of my story and insight. I really appreciate it.
how about so much gratitude to the universe for bringing us into the lunchroom, because I wasn't meant to be there. It was only that my train ran late, that I ran late to a class that I was going to sit in on, that I thought it was rude to interrupt the class, that I decided to go and sit in the lunchroom, which I never ever have ever sat in. So it's
It was
so
meant
weird.
to be.
Yeah.
Meant to
Anyway,
be.
I'm going to
Yeah,
let you
thank
go.
you so
You've
much.
been very generous with your time, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. And good luck with everything in the meantime. Until I'm looking at you, or I'll see you when I'm looking at you. Best
Yeah,
wishes with everything.
thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Leah. Okay. Bye.